I didn't step in front of someone going to lead prayer, did I? No. Okay. Thank you. We continue our series this evening, and we're going to ask the question, what happens or what am I doing when my faith fails? And we're talking not about our lifestyle necessarily, but what we're thinking, what's going on in our psyche, in our heart, in our conscience. What are we thinking? And how can we assess what we're doing if our faith is waning and failing? Let me mention what we're going to talk about Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday evening, Lord willing. On Monday, tomorrow night, we're going to look at the instruction to come out and be separate. And as if I think about what is the most dangerous aspect of our life on the earth in remaining faithful, it's the people around us, potentially at least. If we got the right people around us, then it's not so dangerous. We got help along the way. But oftentimes the people that are around us have the strongest influence and pull, and that's something that we need to think about and monitor for ourselves. The question then is, people ask, how do I get stronger faith? What do I do? So we'll talk about that, try to do that in some practical suggestions for getting stronger faith. And then a similar question, but not just the same. Sometimes we're not doubting as much as we're just not feeling it. And so the third lesson, Wednesday evening, how can I get closer to God? How do we do that? How do we feel it? Because we are so governed by our feelings. And our feelings are not necessarily right or wrong. They're indications of what we're thinking and how we are reacting to that. And we need to kind of keep those things in order so that our feelings do not work against us, but our feelings work for us. So how do I get closer to God and feel that closeness to God? What's that mean anyway? So those are the three lessons after tonight. But what am I doing, or what is happening when my faith fails? What's happening when I'm losing my faith? This is a discussion that's more valuable and useful and more keenly felt before we're in the process of falling or failing. So, and I know I'm talking to good people tonight, but you're going to have tough times and you're going to have questions along the way. And so this is preventative medicine, and I hope it'll be that way for us. We need to take action to be strong and grow in Christ before any crumbling or any doubts begin to assert themselves. There's always a temptation to doubt, but we live in a society now that's more aggressively opposed to faith and more aggressively denounces those who suggest that there is a divine standard for life. And so we need to be ready to give a reason for the hope that is within us. So we're looking tonight at what happens when my faith fails. God requires faith. We've touched on this idea already, but let's nail it down a little more closely. What's that mean? God requires faith. Look at Hebrews chapter 11, the faith chapter. We could spend a lot of time this week on this chapter, but I'm avoiding doing that really, looking at other scriptures. But in Hebrews 11 verse 6, but without faith it is impossible to please Him, for he who comes to God must believe that He is, and that He is the rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. Faith is the avenue of approaching God. Without faith, it's not that God won't let us come, it's that it's impossible to come. We can't approach God at any other basis than faith. God has set things in order such that that is the means by which we have a relationship. It is the basis of our relationship. And I think I suggested that already this morning, but I wanted to hit on it again as we start this lesson. God is invisible. We cannot feel Him. We cannot touch Him. We cannot smell Him. I don't mean to be silly. That none of the senses put us in touch with God. We don't hear Him. And we have to know He is. We have to feel His presence. We have to understand what He wants from us. We have to feel all of this by faith. It's in faith that we have this relationship with God. And that faith is not by sight. Verse 1 of Hebrews 11, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. 3, by faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that the things which are seen were not made of things which are visible. we're learning here that God is outside of the realm of science. He's outside of the material realm. He exists in a spiritual world or a spiritual realm. And if we're going to connect with God, we have to go there. He's not coming here. God can reveal Himself any way He chooses, but He chooses not to reveal Himself materially. The closest thing that we've got to that is Jesus' time on earth, of course. The Son of God came in the flesh. And that was clearly an exception, a moment in time where God asserted something totally other than Himself, typically in the Bible. We see His works, but we do not see Him. In Jesus, we can see God. But ultimately then Jesus will tell us that He is leaving, and we must then follow by faith. So Hebrews 11:1 says that faith is the substance of things hoped for. Substance, that's something that we can grab hold of. It's got weight, it's got a texture, we can feel it with our hands, and faith is what we have as the substance of things hoped for. What do you hope for? What is it that we're looking forward to? We're looking forward to time with God in eternity, and we're looking forward to heaven and the association with Him and all righteous people in heaven before the throne of God. We've got very specific things that have been promised, and therefore we hope for these things. What makes those things real? Have you ever been to Hawaii? Some of you probably have. I have not. And so, do you believe Hawaii exists? I mean, what reason do you have for the existence of Hawaii? Well, I've seen pictures. Well, that's evidence. Have you seen Hawaii? Have you seen heaven? Well, no. But have we not seen pictures? The question I'm leading up to is, do you believe you have a stronger confidence in the existence of Hawaii or heaven? Which one is more real? To me, heaven is much more real. I think about it a lot more than I do Hawaii. I'm aware of Hawaii, and I would like to visit there sometime. That would be a great trip. But heaven is more real to me. And I hope it stays that way, because that's the basis of our relationship with God. Faith makes heaven more real to us even than the material world in which we live. And so faith is the substance. It gives that mass, that measure, that amount that we can touch and feel. It gives that kind of reality to the things that are not seen. It's the evidence of things not seen. And so we understand. We can comprehend a world that was not made out of things that are visible. God did not take something to make something else. He spoke the universe into existence by His words. His words did not even have breath. There was no atmosphere in which to breathe and inhale and then exhale and speak as we do in our material speech. But so what is that will and that power of God as God spoke the world into existence? It was His will. We talk about the will of God. The will of God is a powerful thing. We usually speak of it in just the sense of what He prefers. But the will of God is what brought the world and the universe and human beings into existence. And all of that is outside of the realm of science. It cannot be tested. It cannot be observed. It can only be established and received by faith. And so in Hebrews chapter 11, when it says that without faith it's impossible to please God, we've got to believe that He is, and that He is the rewarder of those who seek Him. We are among those who seek the Lord, and we believe that He is. It's all faith. And that's the nature of the relationship that we have with Him. A couple of passages that we could look at in John chapter 20, verses 24 through 31. John chapter 20 and verse 24. We're looking at how faith functions. And Jesus is talking to doubting Thomas here. Now Thomas, called the twin, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. The other disciples therefore said to him, "We have seen the Lord." So he said to them, "Unless I see in His hands the print of the nails, and put my finger into the print of the nails, and put my hand into His side, I will not believe." And after 8 days, His disciples were again inside, and Thomas with them. Jesus came, the doors being shut, and He stood in the midst and said, peace be to you." And then he said to Thomas, "Reach your finger here and look at my hands. Reach your hand here and put it in my side. Do not be unbelieving, but believing." And Thomas answered and said to him, "My Lord and my God." Now listen to Jesus' rebuke here. It's a gentle and kind rebuke, but a rebuke nonetheless. "Thomas, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." What's the nature of our relationship with Christ? We want to see Him. We feel shortchanged and cheated because we weren't here when He came. We weren't around yet. And now we have got to function without having seen Him. Jesus said, "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe." That's the nature of our relationship with Him. And Jesus now is behaving as one who doesn't belong here. He entered the room without opening the door. He knows the thoughts of Thomas and knows about his doubts and his claims that he would not believe unless. And he knew Thomas was better than that. And so he said, "Thomas, check it out." Do you think Thomas actually reached out and touched Jesus? If it was me, I would be stammering or silent, or I don't think I would dare to touch him to see at this point. Touch to see, just interesting wording, to touch to see if this was real. But Thomas was believing. And Jesus then blessed him in that. Acts chapter 17, another passage that speaks to us about this invisible faith and invisible realm that we live in. Acts 17, verse 24. Let's start in 23. "For I was passing through and considering the objects of your worship. I even found an altar with this inscription, 'To the unknown God.'" This is Paul in Athens. "Therefore the one whom you worship without knowing, him I proclaim to you, God, who made the world and everything in it, since He is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands. Nor is He worshipped with men's hands as though He needed anything, since He Himself gives to all life, breath, and all things. And He has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings, so that they should seek the Lord in hope that they might grope for Him and find Him, though He is not far from each one of us. For in Him we live and move and have our being, as also some of your own prophets have said, for we are also His offspring. Therefore, since we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the divine nature is like gold or silver or stone or something shaped by the art and man's devising. Truly, these times of ignorance God has overlooked. He's been patient. But now commands all men everywhere to repent, because He has appointed a day on which He will judge the world in righteousness by the man He's appointed, Jesus Christ. And so as Paul tries to talk about God, the God these people do not know, called the unknown God by their own choosing, what an example or what an introduction to a lesson Paul has here. And he says things that we know to be true because of the reality of human life on the earth and our spiritual yearnings, that there's got to be more. There's got to be a life that is beyond this world. There must be a God. All these things that flow through our mind, and they do because that's the reality with which we were created. We understand. We are created in the image of God, and part of the image of God, maybe the greater part of the image of God, is the fact that He is not material. And there's a part of us that is not material. I suppose the animals function mechanically. I don't know. The Bible doesn't talk about the spirits of animals. But we don't function mechanically. We're not machines. And well beyond the animals, and much closer rather to the nature of God, we identify with God. We anticipate that God is. And we'll see when and how we decide not to trust God any longer. But it mentions how that God is a God that is not far from us, and we live in Him and have our being. He has predetermined the pre-appointed times and boundaries of their dwelling. We feel like humanity, we feel like we're pushing the boundaries here, talking about sending life, human beings, to Mars. One of the students that go to Stevens University there in New Jersey, he wants to be an astronaut, and he wants to go to Mars. And he said, because you can't come back, because we don't have any craft that can carry enough fuel to get off of Mars and back to Earth. And so if you go to Mars, at least the rule now is you've got to stay there. God has determined our pre-appointed boundaries. He has set limitations, and we need to spend our time seeking for God on the earth while we are here. And so let's keep groping for God until we have faith in Him that gives Him substance in our hearts and in our minds. So we walk by faith and not by sight. Look at Hebrews 10 then. Therefore, do not cast away your confidence, which has great reward. For you need enduring, so that after you have done all the will of God, you may receive the promise. For yet a little while, and He who is coming will come and will not tarry. Now the just shall live by faith. And that's talking about their walk on the earth. They shall. That's the intent of God. They shall walk by faith. But if anyone draws back, does other than that which God wills for us to do, well, my soul has no pleasure in him. But the writer says we're not of those that draw back to destruction, but of those who believe to the saving of the soul. We walk by faith, and our limitations are eternal in the spiritual sense. And so we long for that and work for that, and we hold on to faith to that end. Another passage, 2 Corinthians chapter 5. I don't know if you can read it or not, hopefully. 2 Corinthians 5, 6, and 7. So we are always confident, knowing that while we are at home in the body, we are absent from the Lord. Do we feel that? We're at home in the body. We're here. And we know that the Lord is not here in a bodily form. And we understand that and know that because we walk by faith and not by sight. We know we're not home because God is not here. And so as we think about these things, evidence for faith becomes very important for us. How can we know? How can we believe? And how can we trust these things of God? At the top of the chart, under evidence for faith, I say sensible, and I say no. And then I say reasonable, and I've got a yes. Probably I should explain those terms because I found people don't always get what I'm alluding to here. But I'm looking at the word sensible, and we think logical, reasonable, understandable. You're talking sense, reasonable. Well, in this setting, I'm talking about the five senses. And so faith is not going to be established by evidence in a material sense. We cannot experiment, we cannot observe, we cannot test, and we cannot draw conclusions and then do experiments to test those conclusions. The scientific method does not work for faith. But faith is reasonable, which means there is reason under it and behind it and around it that establishes its reality. And so the evidence for faith is not in the five senses and observed in the five senses, but it is of reasonable conclusions. They are conclusions to which we come with good reason. And so as we think about that and talk about that, God and the spiritual world are outside the realm of science, just like history is out of the realm of science. How do you prove that Abraham Lincoln was assassinated? We even know the guy, right? At least by name, John Wilkes Booth. We know that. How do we know that? Who was there? Who saw it? And so you can pick any period of history that's older than 3 weeks ago or 3 years ago, as far back as we can remember. And you're looking at things that are out of our sight and thus beyond the capacity of testing in a material way. But what we do is we work with documents and eyewitness testimony, and then the documentation and the testing of those eyewitness testimonies We want corroboration. We want more than one witness. We want a plurality. And little by little, we build a case. Which reminds me that it's not just history that functions in this way. Our court system functions in this way. We think there's a lot of science in a courtroom. They talk about DNA and blood types and those kinds of things. And so science is used, but ultimately what we get is two things. We've got eyewitness testimony or testimony of witnesses, whether it's eyes or ears or otherwise, but witness testimony and circumstantial evidence. And circumstantial evidence has its place, but that means that the story that we're using to explain the situation is in fact reasonable to conclude with the circumstances that are left behind. How do you explain the empty tomb of Jesus Christ? The empty tomb is part of the evidence for faith in the resurrection of Christ. Because unless we can explain how the tomb and why the tomb is empty, we have to believe that Jesus left. He left the tomb. No, I can't believe that Jesus left the tomb. So what do you believe? I believe he got up and walked out after what he had been through, wrapped in the linens. Really? He got himself out from behind that stone door, that stone wall that covered the entrance. And so the circumstantial evidences are important, but the eyewitness testimony is much more important. It's not enough for some people. The 10 disciples or apostles said, Thomas, he's risen. We've seen him. And Thomas says, I will not believe until I see some physical evidence. And Jesus gave Thomas the physical evidence because he wanted another eyewitness. And Thomas is left behind to speak to us and talk about why the tomb is empty. So we basically got the testimony of witnesses and we've got circumstantial evidence. But science will never be a part of proving the existence of God or disproving the existence of God because it can't function in a world without observation and experimentation. Science doesn't have any authority there. It's a little bit like celebrities expressing political opinions and giving advice. It's not their thing. And so we want to listen to other people to make decisions about political circumstances and make choices there. And so in the same way, science isn't working in a practical way in terms of providing evidence for faith. And so God has chosen faith. Again, God has chosen faith to be the means by which we live our life. John chapter 5, another example of how Jesus defines the working of faith and what makes it reasonable and logical and what makes it believable. John chapter 5, verse 31 beginning. If I bear witness of myself, my witness is not true. Do you know who said that? That was Jesus. Now, he's not saying that if I say something, it's not true. That's not his point. But me saying it does not make it true in this context, in this paragraph. So let's start again. If I bear witness of myself, Jesus says, if I bear witness of myself, my witness is not true. There is another who bears witness of me, and I know that the witness which he has witnessed of me is true. You have sent to John, and he has borne witness to the truth. Yet I do not receive testimony from man, but I say these things that you may be saved. He has the burning and the shining lamp, and you are willing for a time to rejoice in his life. Still talking about John. Verse 36. But I have greater witness than John's, for the works which the Father has given me to finish, the very works that I do, bear witness of me. What are the works of Jesus? He's referring to his miracles, his exhibition of power and deity by virtue of miracles. They bear witness of me that the Father has sent me. And the Father himself who sent me has testified of me. You have neither heard his voice at any time or seen his form, but you do not have his word abiding in you, because whom he sent, him you do not believe. You search the Scriptures, for in them you think you have eternal life, and these are they which testify of me. But you're not willing to come to me that you may have the life. Jesus has given a list of 5 different things that bear witness, that are a basis for faith. Again, the point is, are you going to believe? Did the passage say everybody will believe? No, it speaks more to those who do not believe. John came, a prophet in the wilderness. We need to think about him. He started his preaching before Jesus really showed himself to be anybody and to be anything. John was preaching in the wilderness long enough to stir up a crowd and a following, and so the people were coming from Jerusalem out into the wilderness near the river Jordan. Look at the map, that's a long way. And John had made such an impact, and people believed him and were baptized. And so John bore witness that the Messiah was come, the kingdom is near. Jesus said, if I tell you I'm him, if I tell you that I am the Messiah, my witness is not true. It's easy to make claims. It's more difficult to back them up. And Jesus is referring to that concept of testifying for himself. Jesus says, I could testify of myself, but you would dismiss that, wouldn't you? Because I'm saying something about myself. It's better for John to bear witness of the fulfilled prophecies. 36, it's better for the miracles to speak for themselves. It's better for the Father to exhibit his power and to show his testimony is with the Son of God. And it's good to review the Scriptures in verse 39. Go back to them and read them again and find in them prophecies that I fulfill. And there's the basis and the reason for faith. Again, the Lord is calling on us to be believers. We have to learn to believe and to trust what we can learn from Scripture and the testimony of those who have seen. Go a little bit further to John chapter 20, verses 30 through 31. The end of the Gospel of John, and truly Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book, but these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name. And so Jesus is claiming that faith must be the basis of our relationship, and you need to be satisfied with the evidence that has been provided. Mark 16 is an interesting passage because, partly because of our use of it to emphasizing the importance and the necessity of baptism. He that believeth and is baptized shall be saved. That's an assertion that we need to pay attention to. He that believes and is baptized shall be saved. But really, if we're honest, looking at the paragraph, the context is really not, this is not a paragraph about baptism. It's a paragraph about faith. Let's read the whole thing. 16:14 in Mark. Later he appeared to the 11 as they sat at the table, and he rebuked their unbelief and hardness of heart. Step 1. He rebuked the disciples because they were slow to believe. He rebuked their unbelief and hardness of heart because they did not believe those who had seen him after he had risen. Remember, the women went to the tomb first, and it's empty, and they run back. And then Mary, later, she's hanging out and staying there, and then she runs back and says, I saw him, I talked to him. Jesus had to rebuke his disciples, and he did. He rebuked them because you didn't even believe your own friends. You did not believe the other disciples who said they saw me. Don't you remember I said this would happen? The third day. Remember, the third day, I'll tell you again. It's the third day, and guess what? The tomb is empty. They should have believed, shouldn't they? Of course, it's easy for us to look back on the story, but Jesus is on our side. You should have believed. He rebuked their unbelief and their hardness of heart because they did not believe those who had seen him, eyewitness testimony. They did not believe the eyewitness testimony of people they knew and trusted. And then in verse 15 he said to them, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. He who believes and is baptized will be saved, and he who does not believe will be condemned. You didn't believe the teaching of your own friends who taught you the resurrection story. And he rebuked them for that. And so get over it, because now what you're going to do is you're going to all the world and you're going to preach the gospel to total strangers and convince them to believe in the resurrection. It's an ironic kind of a situation, isn't it? The place of faith, the faith that we don't easily find, even in our own hearts, the faith that can be fragile as we face difficulties in life. There's nothing else. You can't go anywhere after faith. We drop our faith, where are we going to find Jesus? Where do we go to find God? What do we do to know what to do? No, faith is our refuge. Faith is where we live. And so we need to have this kind of a strong faith. And he continues to talk about faith in verse 17. And these signs, the miracles, will follow those who believe in my name. They will cast out demons. They will speak new tongues. They will take up serpents, and if they drink anything deadly, it will by no means hurt them. They will lay hands on the sick, and they will recover. And so after this, the Lord was received up into heaven, and the Spirit came to confirm the words that they had learned from the Lord. Mark 16, 14 and following is really about faith. That does not diminish the significance and the reality of the commandment to be baptized or to baptize them. You baptize believers. It's just what you do. That's the command. And that is unto salvation. But the passage isn't about the baptism. The passage is about the belief and the unbelief. And that's where the battle line is drawn. In Mark 16, that's clear. In 1 Peter 3, verse 15, 1 Peter 3:15, but sanctify the Lord God in your hearts, and always be ready to give a defense to everyone who asks you a reason for the hope that is in you, yet with meekness and fear. You've got to sanctify the Lord in your hearts. I thought the Lord was sanctifying us. Yes, but the word sanctify is applied differently. What does it mean? It means to set apart. You set the Lord apart in your heart. You give Him that place of prominence and specialness, that chosen place in your heart. You sanctify the Lord in your heart. You make Him the special one. And as you do that, you can make yourself ready to give an answer to anyone who asks you of the hope. He's not talking about evangelism here. In 1 Peter chapter 3, the paragraph is all about persecution, and even hard and severe persecution. And he says, what you do is you sanctify the Lord in your heart, and you be ready to give an answer. Who's that answer for? Well, it's for the people I'm going to tell. They're not listening. The answer's for you. You be ready. You have an answer for every challenge that could come your way. You be ready with an answer to everything that would put doubt in your heart. Sanctify the Lord and set Him apart in your heart by faith. And again, we are living and we're walking by faith. And so, evidence for faith, when people lose their faith, it's not usually because the evidence has changed. And here's where we need to take responsibility, not just for our faith, but take responsibility for our unbelief. When people lose faith, it's rarely because of a change in the evidence. And what are some things that cause unbelief? Look at Romans chapter 1. Romans chapter 1, verse 18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness, because what may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has shown it to them. For since the creation of the world, His invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even His eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Because they knew God, they did not glorify Him as God, nor were they thankful, but became futile in their hearts and thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, and they changed God into an image, a four-footed creature even. It's what they wanted to do because they wanted to live like they wanted to live. And the last half of Romans chapter 1 is the description of their ungodly life of complete self-satisfaction and lasciviousness and materialism and want and lust and greed. Evil world in Romans chapter 1. It was by their choosing. In John chapter 11, verses 45 through 50, why don't we believe? I'm suggesting now because we don't want to. In John chapter 11, Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead. Beginning in verse 45, the text says, "Then many Jews who had come to Mary and had seen the things Jesus did believed in him." They saw the resurrection of Lazarus. "Jesus, we know who you must be." But some of them went away to the Pharisees and told them the things that Jesus did. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered a council and said, "What shall we do? For this man works many signs." What are you going to do to a man who works many signs? "If we let him alone like this, everyone will believe in him." Yeah. "And the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation." That's what we're after. We're protecting our political position and our way of life. Don't mess things up, Jesus. And one of them, Caiaphas, being the high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all, nor do you consider it as expedient for us that one man should die for the people, and not the whole nation should perish." And so he says Jesus needs to die. I think the exclamation point is set in chapter 12. If I can spot the text here. In verse 9, "Now a great many of the Jews who knew that he was there," Jesus had come into Jerusalem, "they came not for fear of Jesus' sake only, but that they might also see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. But the chief priests plotted to put Lazarus to death also, because on account of him many of the Jews went away and believed in Jesus." You going to kill everybody that Jesus resurrects? I think that's a losing battle. So why didn't they believe? What keeps you from believing Jesus after a miracle of resurrection? They didn't want what Jesus had to offer. They wanted what they already had, so they were not willing to change. So there's two passages that suggest that idea. One more in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 10. 2 Thessalonians, Sorry about this. Okay, verse 10. "Now the coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan, with all power and signs and lying wonders, and all unrighteous deception among those who perish." And why is that bad stuff coming and then this result going to happen? "Because they did not receive a love of the truth," middle of verse 10, "that they might be saved. And for this reason God will send them a strong delusion, that they should believe the lie, that they all may be condemned who did not believe the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness." Don't get too tripped up on God sending a delusion that they might believe a lie. Jesus, the Son of God, hanging on a cross was part of the delusion. Who's going to believe in that? Jesus in his humble origin is part of the delusion that causes many people not to believe. That doesn't make sense. And so the delusion is not really to lure believers away from faith and out of faith. The delusion is the nature of the gospel itself that doesn't appeal to anyone but the penitent believer, one who would hope in God, in humility willing to submit to God's way. The delusion doesn't bother them at all. But if you don't have any love for the truth, and if you have love for unrighteousness, then Jesus gets in the way. Faith gets in the way. And so 3 passages that suggest this idea that people choose what they want to believe. And we've got some of the reasons listed here on the chart. You know, I kind of think that most people who are Christians grew up in a Christian home, and anybody who grows up in a Christian home, they're going to follow that. If you grow up in an Islamic home, you're going to follow that. It's just luck of the draw as to what you believe. And I can't believe that God's going to judge anybody or that the Bible has anything it just doesn't make sense, because everybody just inherits their belief. There can't be anything to it. There's too much suffering in the world. Well, all the suffering in the world, how can a God allow the world to exist with all of this suffering? Only one right way? Well, that's just crazy. Everybody has to follow one way. There's only one way to God. Too many people are lost. God's silly requirements, moral restrictions that are just messing up my life, and a significant one, certainly serious, great personal loss and tragedy. These are things that cause people to stop believing in God. But the thing about these things is that they're not evidence. They're not evidence. They're terrible things. They're injustices that we see in the world. They're problems and uncomfortable kind of complications. But none of them prove or offer any logical connection to the existence or the non-existence of God. These are not evidence. They're troubling circumstances. But they have become my reason for giving up my faith. To reject faith for these reasons is not logical or rational, it's emotional. And so if we're going to choose not to believe, let's be sure that we know why we don't believe, and make sure that that's a valid choice. If you're going to believe, make sure that you're believing the truth. And find a way to build a case for the truth that you find in the Bible. And don't choose unbelief. Evidence against faith needs to be contradictory testimony that discredits the apostles and the witnesses. We have to eliminate fulfilled prophecy. I don't know how you eliminate the Bibles all over the world in every language, and it's too late to eliminate the Word of God. It's here to stay. But you have to discredit it. Discredit the prophecies, discredit the testimony of eyewitnesses. And the critics have done their work there, and they continue to do their work there, but have not really had any successful battles and victories in those battles against faith. But understand what is valid evidence against faith. Understand what is valid evidence for faith. And let's be thinkers. Let's not react emotionally. I get too tired. I'm tired in my faith. I'm too depressed. My faith suffers because I'm depressed. I'm confused because of the evil that's in the world, and it bothers me. I find a way to deal with it, because it's no reason to believe or not to believe. It's just here. And let's be thinkers, willing to understand that unbelief is a choice just as surely as faith is a choice. And then we're going to close with Joshua chapter 24, where Joshua calls for a challenge, calls for a commitment in the people. As Joshua has finished his labor and comes to chapter 24, the battles have been fought, at least his battles have been fought. The people are in their land, pretty much have received the land that God said He would give them. He challenged them beginning in verse 14. Now therefore fear the Lord, serve Him in sincerity and in truth, and put away the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the river. If it seems evil to you to serve the Lord, and this is where He's talking to us tonight. If it seems evil to you or bad decision to you to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that are on the other side of the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you now dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. The question is, if I'm not going to believe in God, what do I believe? Well, I'm going to be an atheist. Well, that's a good choice, because you choose a completely material existence that has no hope beyond this physical life, and gives us no answers for moral questions or social questions or how I should expect people to treat me. They can do whatever they want to. Atheism is a life of chaos in the head, if nowhere else. Well, I'm agnostic. I'm just a doubter. I don't really know what the answer is. So you're going to wander aimlessly through life without direction, without any kind of stability, and without any guidance other than what you feel is preferred at the moment. And on you consider these things and realize that that's not life. That's chaos, and that's misdirection. So the question that tonight I'd like for us to take home is, what happens when faith fails? In my heart, what just happened? I quit believing. Why? I need to determine what is at the heart of my thinking. I'm mad, I'm disappointed, I'm hurt, I'm scared, or I want to do what I want to do. If those are the reasons that I choose not to follow God, then declare them and announce them. We'd rather suggest that we don't see enough evidence for God. That's not the reason you don't believe in Him. The reason you don't believe Him is because we don't want to. I need to decide why I'm moving in the direction I am, and I need to deal honestly with myself. So I'm talking to each of us as believers. When the day comes when we're doubting and we're wondering what we're going to do next, don't just throw away faith because you think it's lost. But find a reason in your heart for your unbelief and see if it has any validity at all. I challenge us to be intellectual, or at least that's not the right word. Make intelligent decisions is what I want you to be, not intellectual. Make intelligent decisions about faith and not emotional decisions. Love the Lord as a reaction to the faith that you have in your heart. Joshua called for a commitment from the people. He says, "Choose your God this day. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." Joshua said, "Choose." And he wants them to choose and gave them options. He told them, you can't choose the Lord. And they said, "Oh, yes, we can. Yes, we can." Read it. It's a very intriguing chapter, 24 of Joshua. You can't choose the Lord. And he says, "Okay, you've given testimony on your own name that you're going to do what's right." And said, "So let's start right now. Get rid of your idols." Joshua knew them. They haven't given up their idols yet. Let's see what's going on in our life, what's hidden in our hearts, and make sure we stand with the Lord. And there may be some tonight that you need to make your commitment to the Lord in faith. I pray that you'll do that and respond by coming to the front as we stand and sing.